I think we should stop pretending. Olivia's voice cut through the music so sharply that it felt like the entire room went silent just to hear her say it. I turned slowly, still holding my glass, trying to understand if I heard her right. What are you talking about? I asked, keeping my voice steady. She didn't even look at me at first. Her eyes were fixed somewhere past my shoulder, like I wasn't even worth facing. This, she said, gesturing vaguely between us, it's not real anymore. I let out a small breath, trying to keep my composure. Not real? We've been building this for 3 years. She finally looked at me, but there was no warmth in her eyes. You've been building, she corrected. I've been waiting. I frowned. Waiting for what? She tilted her head slightly, almost like she felt sorry for me. For something better. I followed her gaze, and that's when I saw him, Victor Langford. People shifted around him like gravity had changed direction. Expensive suit, effortless confidence, the kind of presence that made others step aside without thinking. I looked back at Olivia. You're serious? I asked quietly. She gave a small, almost amused smile. Daniel, look at him, look at this place. Her voice lowered, but it somehow felt louder than before. This is the world I belong in. I swallowed the tightness in my throat. And I don't belong in it? She didn't hesitate. No, you don't. The words hit harder than anything she could have shouted. I nodded slowly. So that's it? You're just done? She shrugged like it was nothing. I'm choosing what's right for me. I let out a quiet laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was the only thing keeping me from reacting. Victor walked over like he had been waiting for that exact moment. Everything all right here? He asked, his tone smooth, confident. Olivia stepped closer to him without thinking. Yeah, she said softly, I was just explaining things. He glanced at me, then back at her, then placed his hand lightly on her waist. That one move said everything. You must be Daniel, he said, offering a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. I've heard about you. I nodded. I'm sure you have. Olivia leaned into him slightly, like she had already made her decision hours ago. Victor understands me, she said almost defensively. I raised an eyebrow. That was fast. She frowned. It's not about fast, it's about clarity. Victor chuckled. Sometimes people just know what they deserve. I looked at him calmly. And what do you deserve? He smirked. Everything. I shifted my attention back to Olivia. So what am I? I asked. She crossed her arms. You're comfortable, she said, choosing her words carefully. But comfort isn't enough. I nodded slowly. So I'm average. She didn't even flinch. Yes. The word echoed in my head, louder than the music, louder than the crowd. I felt something inside me crack, but I didn't show it. Instead, I took a small step back and smiled. That seemed to confuse her more than anything. Why are you smiling? She asked. I shrugged slightly. Just realizing something. She narrowed her eyes. What? I met her gaze, steady and calm. That you've already made your decision. Victor squeezed her waist slightly. She made the right one. I looked at him. Maybe. He laughed. You don't seem very upset. I tilted my head. Should I be? Olivia stared at me, searching for something. Anger, desperation, anything. You're not even going to fight for me? She asked. I held her gaze for a long moment before answering. I already did, I said quietly. You just didn't notice. Her expression shifted, just for a second, but she quickly masked it. That's not fair, she said. I shook my head. No, what's not fair is thinking I needed to compete. Victor scoffed. Life is competition. I looked at him again, my smile still there, calm and unreadable. Only for people who don't know their value. That seemed to irritate him. And you do? He asked. I took a sip from my glass, finally tasting it. Yeah, I said simply. Olivia let out a frustrated breath. You're unbelievable, she said. You're acting like this doesn't matter. I lowered the glass and looked at her one last time. It mattered, I said. Just not the way you think. She hesitated, like she wanted to say something else, but Victor gently pulled her closer. Come on, he said, we don't need this. She glanced at me once more before turning away. As they walked off together, I stood there alone, surrounded by people who pretended not to stare. Ethan appeared beside me after a few seconds. Man, that was brutal, he muttered. I exhaled slowly. Yeah. He looked at me carefully. You okay? I nodded. I will be. He frowned. You're way too calm right now. I gave a small smile. That's because I understand something now. He raised an eyebrow. What? I looked across the room at Olivia laughing beside Victor, already fitting into his world like she had always belonged there. She didn't choose him tonight, I said quietly. She chose him a long time ago. Ethan stayed silent for a moment. So what now? He asked. I took another breath, feeling that strange mix of pain and clarity settle inside me. Now, I said. Now I stopped pretending. He studied my face then nodded slowly. That sounds dangerous. I smirked slightly. Not for me. And as the music continued and the crowd moved on, I realized something important. Tonight wasn't the night I lost her. It was the night I finally saw her clearly. The first message I saw the next morning wasn't from Olivia. It was from someone I barely knew. Man, heard what happened. You okay? I stared at it for a second then locked my phone without replying. By the time I reached the coffee shop, 3 more messages had come in. Did she really leave you at the party? Bro, that was rough. You didn't deserve that. I sat down quietly, ordered my usual and ignored all of them. When Ethan walked in he didn't say anything at first. He just sat across from me and studied my face. You're trending, he finally said, sliding his phone across the table. I glanced at the screen. Someone had posted a short clip from last night, Olivia standing beside Victor, me in the background, calm and still. The caption read, "She upgraded in real time." I leaned back slightly. People have too much time, I muttered. Ethan shook his head. No, people love drama. I gave a small nod. Then let them enjoy it. You're really not going to respond to any of this? Ethan asked, leaning forward. I took a sip of my coffee. What's there to respond to? He frowned. Your girlfriend left you for a millionaire in front of a room full of people. I raised an eyebrow. Ex-girlfriend. He sighed. You know what I mean. I set the cup down slowly. If I explain myself they'll twist it. If I defend myself they'll laugh. If I stay quiet, I paused. They'll assume whatever they want. Ethan watched me carefully. And you're okay with that? I shrugged. It doesn't change anything. He leaned back, crossing his arms. You're acting like none of this touched you. I met his gaze. It did. He waited. Then why are you so calm? I exhaled slowly. Because reacting won't fix anything. It'll just make me look smaller. Ethan stayed silent for a moment, then nodded slightly. You've always been like this. I smirked faintly. Not always. Have you seen her posts? Ethan asked, pulling his phone back. I didn't answer immediately, but he took my silence as permission and showed me anyway. Olivia was smiling in every picture, on a balcony overlooking the city, inside a luxury car, holding a glass of champagne beside Victor. Living my best life, one caption read. I studied the image for a second. Looks expensive, I said. Ethan scoffed. That's all you're going to say? I handed the phone back. What do you want me to say? He shook his head. She replaced you overnight. I shrugged. No, she revealed herself overnight. He blinked. That's a cold way to look at it. I leaned forward slightly. It's an honest way to look at it. He hesitated. You don't miss her? I paused, thinking carefully. I miss who I thought she was, I admitted. Not who she actually is. Ethan nodded slowly. That makes sense. I looked down at my coffee. 3 years, Ethan. He didn't interrupt. And it ended in 5 minutes. He sighed. Yeah. I shook my head slightly. No, it ended long before that. I just didn't see it. Later that day, I walked into the office like nothing had changed. Conversations lowered when I passed by, and I could feel eyes on me from every direction. Hey Daniel, Mark from accounting said, trying too hard to sound normal. Morning, I replied calmly. 2 coworkers whispered behind me. That's him, one said quietly. The guy from the video. I pretended not to hear. When I reached my desk, Sophia was already standing there. She looked hesitant. Can I ask you something? She said softly. I nodded. Sure. She glanced around before speaking. Are you actually okay? I gave a small smile. Define okay. She sighed. I mean, you didn't even react last night. I leaned against the desk. Would it have changed anything if I did? She shook her head. No, but I waited. It just felt strange, she finished. I nodded. Yeah, it probably did. She studied my face. You don't seem angry. I shrugged. Anger is loud. I'm not feeling loud right now. She looked confused but didn't push further. If you need anything, she started. I cut her off gently. I appreciate it. She nodded and walked away slowly. Ethan showed up again that evening, this time at my apartment. All right, I need answers, he said the moment he walked in. I laughed lightly. You always do. He pointed at me. No jokes. You've been too calm since last night. I leaned against the counter. And that bothers you? He frowned. It worries me. I crossed my arms. Why? He hesitated. Because people who stay this quiet are either broken or planning something. I smirked slightly. Which one do you think I am? He didn't answer right away. You're not broken, he finally said. I nodded. Good. He stepped closer. So what are you planning? I looked at him for a long second, then shook my head. Nothing yet. He narrowed his eyes. That's not true. I sighed. Okay, I'm thinking. He crossed his arms again. About what? I walked past him and sat down. About everything. He followed me. That's not an answer. I leaned back. It's the only one I have right now. He studied me carefully. You're hiding something. I smiled faintly. I've always been hiding something. He stared at me, then shook his head. You're impossible. That night, I sat alone with my phone in my hand, scrolling through everything people were saying. He got replaced. She found someone better. He looked so weak just standing there. I read each comment without reacting, letting the words pass through me instead of sinking in. After a while, I locked the screen and set the phone down. Is that really how they see it? I muttered to myself. I leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Maybe it is. For a moment, I let myself feel it, the embarrassment, the sting, the quiet anger. But it didn't last long. It couldn't. Because underneath all of that, there was something else growing. Something calmer. Something sharper. I sat up slowly. They think I lost, I said under my breath. A small smile formed on my face, almost without me realizing it. That's fine. I stood up and walked toward the window, looking out at the city lights. Let them think that. My reflection stared back at me, calm and unreadable. Because silence, I paused, feeling that clarity settle in again. Isn't weakness. You've been away long enough. My father's voice didn't need to be loud to carry weight. It filled the room anyway. I stood there, staring at him across the long table, feeling something shift inside me that I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. I didn't come back for a lecture, I said calmly. He didn't react. You came back because you're ready, he replied. My mother sat beside him, watching me with that quiet, knowing expression she always had. Sit down, Daniel, she said softly. I pulled out the chair and sat, keeping my posture relaxed. So, I said, you already know what happened. My father nodded once. I know enough. I let out a small breath. Then you know I handled it. He leaned forward slightly. You didn't react. That's different from handling it. I met his gaze. It's the same thing. He studied me for a moment, then leaned back. No, he said, it's better. You're not angry? I asked, glancing between both of them. My mother smiled faintly. Why would we be? She said. I frowned slightly. She walked away. My father shrugged. Then she removed herself. I let out a quiet laugh. That's one way to put it. My mother reached for her tea, calm as ever. You chose to live outside this world, she said. You wanted something real. I nodded. I did. She looked at me carefully. And now you understand why that's rare. I leaned back in my chair. Yeah, I admitted. I do. My father folded his hands. Tell me something, he said. If she had stayed, would you have told her? I didn't answer right away. I thought about Olivia, about the way she looked at Victor, about the way she called me average. No, I finally said. My father raised an eyebrow. Why not? I gave a small shrug. Because I wanted her to choose me without knowing. My mother nodded slowly. And she didn't. I shook my head. No, she didn't. The door opened behind me and Charlotte walked in without knocking. So this is the big reunion? She said, crossing her arms. I turned slightly. You're late. She smirked. I wanted to see how long you'd pretend everything was fine. I rolled my eyes. I'm not pretending. She walked over and sat beside me, studying my face. You don't look broken, she said. I smiled faintly. I'm not. She leaned closer. Good, she whispered. Because I would have been disappointed. My father cleared his throat. This isn't a game, Charlotte. She looked at him. I know, she said, then turned back to me. So what's the plan? I frowned. Plan? She nodded. Yeah. You're not the type to just sit around after something like that. I leaned back again. Maybe I am. She laughed. No, you're not. My mother watched us quietly. He's thinking, she said. Charlotte smiled. That's worse. I'm not rushing into anything, I said, looking at both of them. Good, my father replied immediately. Rushing is for people who don't understand leverage. I tilted my head slightly. And what do I have? He didn't hesitate. Everything. Charlotte leaned back in her chair. That's what I've been saying, she muttered. I looked at her. You always say everything. She grinned. Because it's always true. My mother set her cup down. Power isn't just what you have, she said gently. It's how you use it. I nodded slowly. I know. She met my eyes. Do you? I paused, then answered honestly. I'm learning. My father stood up, walking toward the window. Victor Langford, he said almost casually. I felt my jaw tighten slightly. You know him? I asked. He looked over his shoulder. I know of him. Charlotte smirked. Everyone does. My father turned back to face us. He's ambitious, he said. But careless. I narrowed my eyes. Careless how? He smiled slightly. He thinks visibility is power. I understood immediately. And it's not. My father nodded. It's exposure. Charlotte leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. So what are you going to do? She asked again. I looked at her, then at my parents, then down at my hands. I'm going to step back in, I said quietly. My mother's expression softened. Into the business? She asked. I nodded. Yeah. My father didn't smile, but I could see approval in his eyes. Good, he said. It's time. Charlotte clapped once. Finally. I smirked. You're enjoying this too much. She shrugged. I've been waiting. I stood up slowly, feeling that calm clarity return, stronger than before. I'm not doing this because of her, I said. My father nodded. You're doing this because of you. I met his gaze. Exactly. My mother stood as well, placing a hand lightly on my arm. Just remember, she said softly, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. I gave a small nod. I know. Charlotte stood beside me. But it's still fun to watch people realize what they lost, she added with a grin. I walked out of the room with them following behind me, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was walking away from something. I felt like I was stepping into something. Ethan was waiting outside, leaning against the wall. That took longer than I expected, he said. I smiled slightly. Family meetings usually do. He looked past me at my parents and Charlotte, then back at me. So, he asked. I took a breath. I'm done staying quiet, I said. His eyes narrowed slightly. That sounds serious. I nodded. It is. He pushed himself off the wall. So what's the first move? I looked ahead, already thinking, already planning. No moves yet, I said. He frowned. Still waiting? I shook my head. Not waiting, I corrected. Positioning. He studied my face, then smiled slowly. Yeah, he said. There it is. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. Because for the first time since that night, I wasn't just observing anymore. I was ready. You're late. Victor didn't even look at Olivia when he said it. I heard it through the open conference call, my screen muted while his voice carried across the line. Olivia forced a small laugh. Traffic was insane, she said. Victor sighed, annoyed. Excuses are for people who don't respect time. I leaned back in my chair, listening quietly. Ethan glanced at me from across the room. That's him? He mouthed. I nodded once. Olivia tried again. I thought we were meeting after this? Victor finally looked at her, his tone colder now. I have a dinner with investors. You can join if you can keep up. There was a pause. Keep up. Olivia repeated. Yes, Victor said flatly. No emotional scenes, no distractions. I don't mix business with complications. I could almost feel the shift in her expression without seeing it. I'm not a complication, she said. Victor smirked. Then don't act like one. I ended the audio feed and closed the window. Ethan leaned forward. So the fairy tale is already cracking. I picked up a file calmly. It was never a fairy tale. You're moving faster than expected, Ethan said, watching me review documents. I didn't look up. He's predictable. Ethan crossed his arms. You've only been back for a few days. I flipped a page. That's all it takes when someone builds their empire on noise. He frowned. Noise? I nodded. Visibility. Attention. Flash. I tapped the file lightly. It looks strong from the outside, but it's hollow. Ethan leaned closer. And you're sure about this? I met his eyes. I don't move unless I'm sure. He exhaled slowly. So the deal in Chicago, I nodded. Pulled. And the investors? He asked. Reconsidering, I replied calmly. Ethan let out a low whistle. You're not even touching him directly. I smirked slightly. I don't need to. He shook his head. He has no idea. I leaned back. That's the point. Ethan studied me for a moment. You're different. I raised an eyebrow. How? He shrugged. Colder. I smiled faintly. No, I said. Clearer. Across the city, Olivia sat in Victor's penthouse, staring at her phone. You're not even listening to me, she said, her voice tight. Victor didn't look up from his laptop. I heard you, he replied. You said you're bored. Olivia stood up, frustrated. I didn't say bored. I said you've been distant. He typed something, then finally glanced at her. I'm working. She crossed her arms. You're always working. He closed the laptop slowly. Do you know what keeps this lifestyle going? He asked. She hesitated. I do. He leaned forward. Then stopped questioning it. She stared at him, something uncertain in her eyes. I thought this would be different, she said quietly. Victor raised an eyebrow. Different how? She struggled for a second. More real. He laughed once, short and sharp. Real doesn't build empires. That line lingered in the air. Olivia looked away first. Sophia sat beside Olivia later that evening, watching her carefully. You don't look happy, she said. Olivia forced a smile. I'm fine. Sophia shook her head. No, you're not. Olivia sighed. It's just different than I expected. Sophia leaned back. Different or worse? Olivia didn't answer immediately. He's busy, she finally said. Sophia raised an eyebrow. That's not what I asked. Olivia looked down at her glass. He's not the same person I thought he was. Sophia nodded slowly. And Daniel? She asked quietly. Olivia froze for a second. Why are you bringing him up? Sophia shrugged. Because you don't talk about him at all. Olivia looked away. There's nothing to talk about. Sophia studied her face. You sure about that? Olivia tightened her grip on the glass. I made my choice. Sophia leaned closer. That doesn't mean it was the right one. Olivia didn't respond. Grace found Olivia the next day standing near the balcony, staring at the city. You look like you're thinking too much, Grace said casually. Olivia glanced at her. Maybe I am. Grace crossed her arms. About him. Olivia frowned. Which one? Grace gave her a look. You know which one. Olivia exhaled slowly. I'm with Victor now. Grace nodded. That's not what I asked. Olivia looked back at the skyline. Things are just different. Grace stepped closer. Different how? Olivia hesitated. He doesn't see me the way Daniel did. Grace didn't look surprised. Of course he doesn't. Olivia turned to her. What's that supposed to mean? Grace held her gaze. Daniel looked at you like you mattered. Victor looks at you like you fit. The words hit harder than Olivia expected. That's not fair, she said. Grace shrugged. It's honest. Olivia looked away again, quieter now. I can't just go back. Grace shook her head. No, you can't. She paused. But you can admit you might have walked away from something real. Olivia stayed silent. Back in my office, I reviewed another report as Ethan walked in. You're not going to believe this, he said. I didn't look up. Try me. He placed a file on my desk. Victor just lost another contract. I flipped it open, scanning quickly. Expected, I said. Ethan laughed. You planned that too? I closed the file. I created the conditions. He leaned forward. And Olivia? He asked. I paused for a second. What about her? He shrugged. You ever think about how she's reacting to all this? I leaned back in my chair. She's starting to see the truth. Ethan raised an eyebrow. And that matters to you? I shook my head slowly. No, I said. But it matters to her. He watched me carefully. You don't sound angry anymore. I gave a small smile. I'm not. He frowned. Then what are you? I met his gaze, calm and steady. In control. They confirmed it, Ethan said as he stepped into my office, closing the door behind him. I didn't look up immediately. Which one? I asked, finishing the line I was reviewing. The New York acquisition, he replied, placing the folder on my desk. Victor was leading that deal. I nodded once and opened the file. Not anymore. Ethan watched me carefully. You really pulled it off. I flipped through the pages calmly. I didn't pull anything, I said. I just gave them a better option. He let out a low breath. You outbid him without even showing your face. I leaned back slightly. Visibility isn't always power. He smirked. Your father would be proud. I met his eyes. This isn't about him. Ethan nodded. I know. I closed the file and set it aside. This is just the beginning. He raised an eyebrow. You're not going to stop, are you? I shook my head slowly. No. Across the city, Victor slammed his hand against the table. How did this happen? He snapped. Mark Collins shifted uncomfortably. They said another party came in last minute, he explained. Victor narrowed his eyes. Who? Mark hesitated. They didn't say. Victor laughed bitterly. Of course they didn't. He paced the room, running a hand through his hair. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. Everything was aligned. Mark glanced at the reports. It still could be salvaged, he said carefully. Victor stopped and turned sharply. Salvaged? He repeated. We just lost a multi-million-dollar deal. Mark stayed quiet. Victor exhaled harshly. Someone is interfering, he said. I can feel it. Mark frowned. Competitors? Victor shook his head. No, this is deliberate. He looked at the window, jaw tight. Someone is targeting me. Olivia stood in the corner of the room, watching the entire exchange. Maybe it's just business, she said cautiously. Victor turned toward her. You don't understand business, he replied coldly. She stiffened. I'm just saying. He cut her off. Don't. The room went silent. Olivia looked away, her expression tightening. Victor picked up a glass and took a sip. This doesn't happen without a reason, he said, calmer now but more dangerous. Mark nodded slowly. We'll find out who it is. Victor smirked faintly. We will. Olivia crossed her arms, her voice quieter now. You've been losing a lot lately. Victor's gaze snapped back to her. Careful, he said. She held his stare for a moment, then looked away again. I'm just noticing, she muttered. Victor turned back to the window. Then noticed quietly. Later that evening, Olivia sat with Sophia at a quiet restaurant. Have you seen the news? Sophia asked, sliding her phone across the table. Olivia glanced down. A headline caught her attention immediately. Hayes Group secures major acquisition deal. Her brows furrowed. Hayes? She repeated. Sophia nodded. Yeah. Big move. Olivia stared at the screen, something uneasy forming in her chest. Who's running it? She asked. Sophia shrugged. Not sure. But whoever it is, they're making waves. Olivia scrolled slightly, then froze. A name appeared briefly in the article, Daniel Hayes. Her fingers tightened around the phone. No, she whispered under her breath. Sophia leaned forward. What? Olivia shook her head quickly. Nothing. Sophia narrowed her eyes. You look like you've seen a ghost. Olivia forced a small laugh. I'm fine. But she wasn't. You saw it, didn't you? Ethan asked as he leaned against my desk later that night. I nodded. It's spreading faster than expected. He smirked. Your name is starting to show up everywhere. I folded my hands together. Not everywhere. Just enough. Ethan crossed his arms. Victor's definitely feeling it. I looked at him. Good. He tilted his head. You don't sound satisfied. I shook my head. Because this isn't about satisfaction. He frowned. Then what is it about? I leaned back slightly. Control. Ethan studied me. You're making him lose without even touching him directly. I nodded. That's the only way it works. He let out a breath. And Olivia? I paused for a second. She's starting to notice. He raised an eyebrow. You think she knows? I shook my head. Not yet. Ethan smirked. But she will. I met his gaze. Yeah, I said quietly. She will. Back in Victor's office, tension filled the air again. Another one? He snapped, looking at the report in front of him. Mark nodded. The investors pulled out this morning. Victor clenched his jaw. Why? Mark hesitated. They said they found a more stable opportunity. Victor laughed, but there was no humor in it. Stable? He repeated. Since when am I not stable? Mark stayed silent. Victor slammed the report down. Find out who it is, he said sharply. I want names. Mark nodded quickly. I'm on it. Victor turned away, staring out at the city. This isn't random, he muttered. Someone is playing a long game. Olivia watched him from the doorway, her expression unreadable. Maybe you're not as untouchable as you thought, she said quietly. Victor didn't turn around. Everyone is untouchable, he replied. Until they're not. I stood by my window that night, looking out at the same city, but from a very different position. Ethan stepped beside me. So this is it? He asked. I shook my head. Not even close. He smiled slightly. You've already shifted everything. I glanced at him. No, I said. I've just started moving pieces. He leaned against the glass. Victor's losing control. I nodded. And I'm gaining it. Ethan looked at me carefully. You don't look like someone who just got revenge. I let out a quiet breath. Because this isn't revenge. He frowned. Then what is it? I turned my gaze back to the city lights, calm and steady. It's balance. Say it again. Victor's voice echoed through the speaker on my desk, sharp and strained in a way I hadn't heard before. I didn't mute the call this time. I wanted to hear everything. Mark Collins cleared his throat. The investors pulled out completely, he said. All of them. There was a long silence. That's not possible, Victor replied. It already happened, Mark said quietly. I leaned back, watching the numbers update on my screen. Ethan stood beside me, arms crossed. He's unraveling, he whispered. I didn't respond. Victor's voice came again, louder now. Why? He demanded. Mark hesitated. They don't trust the projections anymore. Victor laughed harshly. They trusted them last week. Mark didn't answer. Victor's tone dropped, colder. Who replaced us? Another pause. Hayes Group, Mark said. I saw Ethan glance at me. I stayed still. Hayes. Victor repeated slowly. Who the hell is running Hayes right now? Mark hesitated again. Daniel Hayes, he said. Silence followed. Heavy. Final. That's not possible, Victor said again, but this time his voice wasn't confident. It was uncertain. He's nothing, he added like he was trying to convince himself. I leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on the desk. Ethan smirked. You want to say hi? He whispered. I shook my head once. Not yet. On the call, Mark spoke carefully. Victor. I think you underestimated him. Victor snapped. Don't say that name like it matters. Mark stayed calm. It does matter now. There was a sound of something hitting the desk. You're telling me everything collapsed because of him? Victor demanded. Not just him, Mark replied. But yes, he's leading it. Victor's breathing grew heavier. Find me everything on him, he said. I want to know who I'm dealing with. Mark didn't answer immediately. You already know, he finally said. Victor went quiet again. This time it sounded like realization was starting to settle in. Later that day the headlines started flooding in. Ethan dropped his phone onto my desk. You've officially ended him, he said. I glanced at the screen. Langford Group faces major financial collapse. I exhaled slowly. It's not over yet. Ethan raised an eyebrow. What's left? I looked at the numbers again. The part where he realizes there's no way back. Ethan nodded slowly. And Olivia? He asked. I paused for a second. She's already feeling it. He leaned against the desk. You think she'll come to you? I met his eyes. I know she will. He smirked slightly. And what are you going to do? I looked away thinking. Nothing, I said finally. She already made her choice. Ethan studied me carefully. You sound like you've already moved on. I gave a small nod. I have. Olivia showed up that evening without calling. I opened the door and saw her standing there, no makeup, no confidence, no control. Just uncertainty. Daniel, she said softly. I didn't step aside. Why are you here? She looked down for a moment, then back up at me. I need to talk. I considered it for a second, then moved slightly to let her in. She walked inside slowly, looking around like she didn't recognize the space anymore. You've changed, she said quietly. I closed the door behind her. No, I replied. You just see me differently now. She swallowed hard. I didn't know, she said. That's the point, I answered. She looked at me, her eyes searching. Why didn't you tell me? I shrugged slightly. Would it have mattered? She didn't answer. That was answer enough. I made a mistake, she said finally, her voice breaking slightly. I stayed silent. She took a step closer. I thought I knew what I wanted, she continued. I thought money, status, all of that would make things better. I crossed my arms. And? She shook her head slowly. It didn't. I watched her carefully. Victor, she started then stopped. He's not what I thought. I nodded. I figured. She looked at me again, her eyes filled with regret now. You were different, she said. You actually cared. I let out a quiet breath. That wasn't enough for you. She flinched slightly. I didn't understand, she whispered. No, I said. You didn't. She stepped closer again. I do now. I shook my head. That's too late. Her voice cracked. Please don't say that. I met her gaze, calm and steady. Why not? It's the truth. I can fix this, she said quickly. We can go back to how things were. I almost laughed, but I didn't. There is no going back, I said. She shook her head, tears forming now. Daniel, I was wrong. I chose the wrong person. I tilted my head slightly. You didn't choose the wrong person, I corrected. You chose what you valued more. She stared at me speechless. And now that it's gone, you're looking for something else, I continued. That's not how this works. She wiped her tears quickly. I'm not here because of money, she said. I raised an eyebrow. Then why are you here? She hesitated. Because I realized what I lost. I nodded slowly. You didn't lose me, I said. You gave me away. That hit her harder than anything else. She took a step back like she needed distance just to breathe. So that's it, she asked quietly. You're just going to walk away? I looked at her for a long moment. I already did, I said. She shook her head, tears falling now. You're not even angry, she whispered. I sighed softly. I admitted. But anger doesn't last forever. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Then what do you feel? She asked. I thought about it for a second, then answered honestly. Nothing. Her face broke completely at that word. Nothing? She repeated. I nodded. You taught me something important, I said. Not everyone deserves access to you. She covered her mouth, trying to hold back her emotions. I'm sorry, she whispered. I gave a small nod. I know. She looked at me one last time. I wish I could change it. I opened the door again. You can't, I said calmly. But you can live with it. She stood there for a second, then slowly walked out. I closed the door behind her, feeling nothing but quiet clarity. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to welcome our newest partner. The room fell into a soft silence as the host gestured toward the entrance. I stood just outside for a second, hearing the same kind of music, the same kind of quiet whispers that once surrounded me, but this time it felt different. Ethan stood beside me. Ready? He asked quietly. I adjusted my cufflinks. I've been ready, I replied. He smirked. They're not. I stepped forward, entering the hall slowly. Conversation stopped almost instantly. Eyes turned. Recognition spread in waves. Some faces showed confusion. Others showed shock. And then I saw them, Olivia and Victor, standing near the center, frozen in place. Olivia's eyes widened the moment she saw me. Victor's expression tightened, like he couldn't process what he was looking at. I walked forward calmly, every step measured, every movement controlled. The same room. The same kind of night. But this time, everything had changed. Daniel Hayes, the host announced clearly. Heir to the Hayes Group. The words echoed louder than anything else in that room. I stopped a few steps ahead, letting the silence settle. Olivia's hand trembled slightly at her side. No, she whispered. I heard it. I looked directly at her, calm and steady. Victor let out a short, disbelieving laugh. This is a joke, he said. I tilted my head slightly. Does it look like one? He stared at me, searching for something, weakness, uncertainty, anything. But there was nothing left to find. Olivia took a small step forward. You knew all along? She asked. I met her gaze. I didn't need to tell you, I said. Her face paled instantly. Why didn't you say anything? She asked, her voice breaking. I gave a small shrug. Because I wanted to see what you'd choose. Victor scoffed. This doesn't change anything, he said quickly. I glanced at him. It already did. You planned this, Victor said, his voice sharp now. I shook my head slightly. No, I replied. I just stopped holding back. He stepped closer, anger rising. You destroyed everything, he said. I looked at him calmly. You built something that couldn't last. He clenched his jaw. You think you've won? I didn't answer immediately. I looked around the room. The same kind of people who once watched me get humiliated were now watching him fall apart. This isn't about winning, I said finally. It's about truth. Victor laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. Truth? He repeated. You're just another rich kid playing games. I smiled faintly. If that helps you sleep, keep believing that. He didn't respond. because deep down he already knew. Olivia stepped closer, ignoring him completely now. Daniel, please, she said softly. I turned my attention back to her. Don't, I said quietly. She shook her head, tears already forming. I didn't know, she repeated. You keep saying that, I replied. But it doesn't change anything. She looked at me like she was searching for the version of me she used to know. I thought I chose better, she whispered. I nodded slowly. You chose what you valued, I corrected. Her lips trembled. And I was wrong, she said. I didn't argue with that. She took another step forward. Can we talk? Just us. I shook my head. There's nothing left to say. Her voice cracked. There is for me. I met her eyes, calm and distant. That's your burden, not mine. I made a mistake, she said again, louder this time, like she needed everyone to hear it. The room stayed silent. No one interrupted. No one moved. I watched her carefully. I left you for something that wasn't real, she continued. I thought money meant stability, that status meant happiness. She wiped her tears quickly. But you were real. I let out a quiet breath. And you didn't choose that, I said. She nodded weakly. I know. I glanced at Victor briefly. He stood there, silent now, no longer trying to argue. Just watching. Everything fell apart, Olivia said. And I finally saw it. I looked back at her. You saw it because it affected you, I replied. Not because you understood it. That stopped her completely. She didn't argue. She couldn't. Please, she whispered. Give me another chance. I looked at her for a long moment. The same person who once walked away from me without hesitation was now standing in front of me, asking for something she didn't value when she had it. No, I said simply. The word hit harder than anything else I could have said. She shook her head quickly. You don't mean that, she said. I didn't change my expression. I do. She took a step back, like the ground beneath her shifted. You're not even angry, she said, almost confused. I gave a small nod. I'm not. She frowned. Then why won't you try again? I met her gaze one last time. Because I learned something, I said. What? She asked softly. I paused for a second before answering. That silence shows you everything words try to hide. The room stayed quiet as I stepped back slightly. No applause. No dramatic ending. Just understanding settling into the space. Victor didn't say anything else. He couldn't. Olivia stood there, broken in a way she hadn't been before, not because of what she lost, but because she finally understood it. I turned away from both of them, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. Ethan caught up to me as I walked toward the exit. That was clean, he said. I smiled faintly. It didn't need to be anything else. He glanced back once. You sure you're done? I nodded. Yeah. He studied me for a second. No revenge speech? I shook my head. I didn't need one. We stepped outside into the quiet night. I took a deep breath, letting everything settle. Not anger. Not regret. Just peace. And as I walked away, I realized something simple, but powerful. I never lost anything that was meant for me.